schizophrenia spectrum. I'm going to turn the lights off because I've got some interesting video clips and I think y'all can see them good enough. I think most of y'all see it if I can flip it on. Can y'all do? It's actually better for us to see it. I like that picture too because it really is somewhat reflective of people with schizophrenia. They're really not quite sure who they are, and there are lots of things going on inside their life and their experience. I've got a couple of video clips in here that are really interesting. Catatonic schizophrenia, it was like the classic simple schizophrenia. It's an old video clip, but it is so good for the way they will come across. And I have a really cool one that actually makes you the schizophrenic. They have filmed it as if you are the schizophrenic and how does the world come at them. And I think it's actually better. It's probably the best thing I've seen. I think it gives you a really good idea of what is it like if you were sick with schizophrenia. So let's go ahead and move on into this. Okay, this is somewhat a change. The DSM5 has been changing a lot of things, and a lot of the diagnoses used to be all individualized. We had schizophrenia, and then we had psychotic disorder. They broke them all down, but they've been harmonizing things and really appreciating that all of these diagnoses actually operate on the spectrum. So you hear people talk about where are folks on the spectrum. You hear that for autistic disorder, and that's now autism spectrum disorder, because there's a lot of different presentations from very extreme to very mild, and it probably makes more sense to look at those disorders as a whole array spread across a range of possibilities. They have done the same thing with schizophrenia, and they've actually changed the heading for this whole thing. For example, you've now got this spectrum, and this is, I have arranged them here on the gradient of psychopathology, like how dysfunctional is one thing relative to another. So you start with schizotypal personality disorder, which we will cover next week, but it would be on the spectrum if you wanted to look at it like that. We have delusional disorder, which I'm really not going to cover, but I tell you in a hurry, it's a delusion for like 2 weeks or less, and it can be anything. I'm in love with somebody, they're in love with me. You see these syndromes a lot. People who have infatuations with movie stars, but they actually really believe the movie star does love them and they want to return favors, and they end up getting arrested in a restaurant somewhere coming up, and the person says, "Get off of me, I don't know who you are," that type thing. But schizotypal personality disorder, delusional disorder, brief psychotic disorder, schizophreniform disorder, schizophrenia, then schizoaffective disorder, and then substance medication-induced psychotic disorder. We're going to look at everything in yellow, but only these 5 today. And I'm actually going to start it with schizophrenia because schizophrenia is kind of like the classic presentation, and everything else kind of hangs off of that. And they all actually reference the diagnostic criteria for schizophrenia in these other things, like brief psychotic disorder and schizophreniform are always diagnosed in distinction to schizophrenia. And you'll understand what I'm saying as we kind of get all our diagnostic criteria down. Okay, schizophrenia spectrum and other psychotic disorders, they all are grouped together because there are 5 domains of dysfunction that you can see. All of them don't have to be present for every diagnosis, but these are the 5 that will define it one way or the other. So you have to have delusions, hallucinations, disorganized thinking, which shows up as speech. I mean, you can't look at a person and say you're not thinking right. You know they're not thinking right because they're talking to you. Okay? And then grossly disorganized or abnormal motor behavior, including catatonia, and negative symptoms, which we'll go over and kind of look at in light of schizophrenia. But these disorders as a group are defined by having abnormalities in one or more of those 5 domains. I wanted to look at catatonic behavior a little bit more. We talked about it on the first day, and there were some of the definitions I think you got to read for yourself. And I hope that you've looked at those, because you have to have looked at those and you have to understand what they are by definition. But I wanted to group together those definitions up under catatonic behavior, which is grouped under grossly disorganized or abnormal motor behavior. Just a little bit more. And in catatonic behavior, there is decrease in reactivity to the environment. That's a definition I didn't really put in at the beginning, so I want you to look at it again, because I think it kind of helps you understand this whole concept of catatonia. I think if you're like me, when you grew up, catatonic meant you just sat there, you didn't move. Well, catatonia can actually be moving around. So, but it's a disconnection, a disconnected or decreased reactivity to the environment. And it ranges. There's a range of expressions of catatonic behavior, from negativism, resistance to instructions. We talk about that, where you say, I want to shake your hand, the man pulls back. They do the opposite of what you say. So that's a pretty much a marked decrease in reactivity. So it's a reaction in the negative sense. Or it could be maintaining a rigid, inappropriate, or bizarre posture. You saw that where you move them in that plasticity and they just kind of stay in a spot. It can go all the way to mutism and stupor. They don't say anything and they have no motor responses. They just are there. When you see a schizophrenic person, that you will, if you've not encountered a lot of schizophrenic patients, that's one of the things I think that creeps you out the most when you're with them, and they really do. They don't make you feel comfortable when you first get there. You begin to appreciate them, but they don't react to you. It's like you're talking to them and you look really nice today. And you're like, oh, well, thank you. You're really nice today. And they just kind of stare at you. It's like, ew. I'm an interactive person. If you don't interact with me, I'm going to get creeped out. So you have to watch it. Okay, so this is the range from being resistant to instructions all the way to just nothing, no movement. But now here's catatonic excitement. Almost doesn't fit what you think catatonia should be associated with. This is that purposeless excessive motor activity without obvious cause we talked about before. You know what it looks like? When you see it, you'll know it. It's kind of like this. Let me just put it down. This is like a schizophrenic, and they'll kind of know expression kind of go on. It's just that kind of stuff. It's like, what are you doing? Okay, that's catatonic excitation. They just keep moving. It's like, sit down. And they don't do anything. And you keep thinking you're going to do something, but they're not doing anything. But they get on your nerves. Okay, can get on your nerves. Okay. All right. Some other features of catatonia can be repeated stereotyped movements. This is another thing about schizophrenic patients that bothers people, is they just keep doing things. It's like, why are they doing that? They might do that like, and they just keep doing it. It's like, what is that? That's stereotype, ongoing, similar behavior. Staring, that bothers me. Okay? Just watch you. This bothers people too. Grimacing. You see, there are medication adverse effects that can lead to that grimacing, one of those extrapyramidal symptoms. And the first schizophrenic person that really creeped me out was the one that just kept grimacing all the time. And they just kind of go up there, just like, okay, that person's not normal. And then echoing speech, echolalia, we talked about that. But these are all catatonic symptoms, catatonia, all part of grossly disorganized or abnormal motor behavior. Okay. Now another thing, you have to understand the term negative symptoms. Okay. There are positive symptoms and negative symptoms. Let me go back and show you something here. Okay. Positive symptoms, delusions, hallucinations, disorganized thinking as it shows up in speech, grossly disorganized or abnormal motor behavior. Those are positive symptoms. That's stuff you're doing or kind of doing bizarrely. Negative symptoms are a cause of most of the morbidity of schizophrenia. They're part of the reason why they don't function well, don't do well, but they are less prominent in other psychotic disorders. They're mostly in schizophrenia. So the negative symptoms will not show up in diagnostic criteria for some of these things I put up there on the schizophrenia spectrum. But the two most prominent negative symptoms in schizophrenia, diminished emotional expression. Okay, we already talked about that a little bit. Of catatonic stuff gives you a weird look. But these are reductions in expression of emotions in the face. So we get used to people reacting, they're positive, negative, quizzical. You get something from the face, you won't get that from schizophrenia so often. Eye contact is diminished. They won't make it. Sometimes they stare at you, Sometimes they won't look at you. You don't know what they're thinking. Intonation of speech is diminished. That's like the word is prosody. Have y'all seen that word before? Okay, so prosody, that's like normal, normal speech might be, welcome, come in, have a seat, sit down. Welcome, come in, have a seat, sit down. Or something like that. It's just straight across the board and very flat, nothing to excite you. And then another would be in emotion expression is decreased movement of the hands, head, and face that normally give an emotional emphasis to speech. Okay, I am clearly not schizophrenic because I move. I move a lot. And so when people are talking, people who talk with their hands, their face, and all this, that's part of normal expression. And schizophrenic patients don't do that as much. So you really have a hard time getting a lot of clues from them about how they are responding to you. And that's part of what creeps you out. You all like to talk to people and interact, and you like that give and take, and you won't get that with a schizophrenic patient, and it's kind of hard. You don't know where you are. You have to get over thinking that you're going to interact that way, but you learn how to interact. It's just not in the way you would expect with another person, and you get used to it. Okay. Another part of this negative symptoms, we have diminished emotional expression and avolition. That's the term that's used in the diagnostic criteria. That's what psychiatry would use as avolition. Okay, A is without, volition is your own will, to do something. It's a decrease in motivated, self-initiated, purposeful activities. The individual may sit for long periods of time and show little interest in participating in work or social activities. Y'all seen the movie, everybody's seen the Halloween movies, that whole series of movies, Michael Myers. Okay, so you don't watch scary movies. No. But how many of y'all seen, most people seen Halloween, okay. Well, in the first movie, they have Michael Myers sitting in the room, after he's done his bad thing, and he's a psych patient, he's like 18 or 19 years old, he's just sitting in that room staring out the window, and the psychiatrist says, I think Michael Myers is a lot of things, but I could use that example. He's just sitting there looking out, and he said he just stares. He has these dark, black, soulless eyes just staring and sitting in a chair all day doing nothing. He said he's just sitting there, thinking and planning, and one day he's just going to do something, and he eventually does. I always think, okay, a lot of psych patients will do that. You will just always see them sitting, looking, doing nothing, and it's like, oh gosh, it's not a good life. Okay. So the other negative symptoms, there are 3 other negative symptoms you can describe. Alogia, without logia, diminished speech output. See, I'm not schizophrenic. I've had some good speech output. Okay, anhedonia pops up. We've all been over that. Can't experience pleasure. Don't have the ability to enjoy things or get pleasure out of things. And then asociality, very typical for schizophrenics. Lack of interest in social interactions of one sort or another. Can be part of just avolition, no will to crank up anything or do anything, but it can also just be lack of opportunities. If you look like a schizophrenic patient looks and you have all those expressions and odd movements and behaviors, people tend to stay away from them. When you see the homeless people in downtown Oklahoma City, I will tell you 50% of them are probably schizophrenic. And I've gone up and talked to different people. Oh, you got to be careful. You just don't know what you're going to get when you talk to people. But a lot of those people are isolated and they're just sitting there, and they're scary in some ways to people, or they just don't want to interact. They just kind of stay back. It's very sad in so many ways. Okay. So we just looked at those big areas that have to be part of a psychotic disorder. So let's look at the DSM5 criteria for schizophrenia. Okay, because you got all your vocabulary that you need now. 2 or more of the following during a 1-month period, okay, during a significant portion of a 1-month period, or less if successfully treated. At least one of these must be number 1, number 2, or number 3, and I left them in yellow. So you have to have 2 or more of these 5 symptoms, and one of them, at least one of those 2 or more, has to be 1, 2, or 3. So they have to have delusions or hallucinations or disorganized speech, plus something else. They could have disorganized speech and grossly disorganized or catatonic behavior. That would fulfill the criteria. They could have delusions, hallucinations, and disorganized speech, and that would take care of it. But they have to have one of those three to kind of pull it off. And so here's those 5 symptoms. They have to have had a significant portion of the time where their level of functioning was way below what they are when they aren't in a schizophrenia, when they don't have schizophrenia. So it's always a disability. It's a fairly notable disability. So 2 or more of these 5 symptoms for at least a 1-month period, at least one of them has to be a hallucination, delusion, or disorganized speech, and their function has to be way down. They have to have had these continuous signs of disturbance persist for at least 6 months. The durations are important with these diagnoses. I will tell you, you've got to know how long they run. Schizophrenia is the longest of all the ones that we deal with, but that's their definition. The 6-month period must include at least 1 month of symptoms, or less if successfully treated, that meet criterion A. That's the active phase symptoms. They call these 5 are active phase symptoms. So they have to have had at least 1 month where those were active, and they may have periods of prodromal or residual symptoms. So you have to appreciate prodrome and residual. Prodrome is when things are kind of odd, and then residual is after they've had their acute phase and they still have some oddities about them, but they don't have the number count that they need. But the history is enough that you can count the prodrome and the residual symptoms as far as that 6-month period. And in that 6-month period of leading up to a major break and then going down, you have that 1 month of those active symptoms. Now this is interesting. During the prodromal or residual periods, the signs of the disturbance may be manifested by only negative symptoms or by 2 or more symptoms listed in criterion A present in an attenuated form. That is, odd beliefs, unusual perceptual experiences. So it's kind of a watered down criterion A, or it could just be negative symptoms. See, that's not 2 symptoms, that's some. So you can, as long as you've got this long 6-month period, and you have 1 month where you have the number count, then you can call that schizophrenia. Now, this, I don't know if you can appreciate this right now, but let me just say it, and then we'll have to look at the other diagnoses, and you'll begin to appreciate it when you go study them all. Schizoaffective disorder and depression or bipolar disorder with psychotic features have been ruled out. So you have to have ruled out schizoaffective and depressive or bipolar disorders. And they're ruled out because there was no major depressive or manic episode have occurred consistent with the active phase symptoms. Okay? And if the mood episodes have occurred during the active phase symptoms, they have been present for a minority of the total duration of the active and residual periods of the illness. Trust me, just hold that for a second. That it's more than you can process right this second. But it has to do with, is there an affective disorder? And you know that affective disorders deal with what? What do affective disorders deal with? Emotion or mood. And what are the 2 moods that we've dealt with the most so far? Depression and mania. Okay. Bipolar, where they can be depressed and manic. So we have, those are the 2 moods we're looking at. So when you're looking at schizoaffective, you're actually trying to, you got to rule out some kind of affective thing going on while they also have the active phase symptoms like delusions and hallucinations. It'll make more sense as we finish the whole thing out. Also, this is what you'll see in every criteria from DSM-5. The disturbance is not attributable to the physiological effects of the substance, so they're not on some street drug doing something, or another medical condition. Because a lot of medical conditions can cause odd things. You have chronic renal failure and you don't go to dialysis and you become uremic and you act weird. Okay, that cannot be schizophrenia. You might have a lot of symptoms, but that's not it. You could have liver disease. You could have, had a stroke or something. Then if there is a history of autism spectrum disorder or a communication disorder of childhood onset, the additional diagnosis of schizophrenia is made only if prominent delusions or hallucinations in addition to the other required symptoms of schizophrenia are also present for at least 1 month. it will make sense when you have the autism spectrum disorder. A lot of their presentation is kind of odd. It's not interactive, it's not as expression-filled as you might be familiar, and there's a lot of movement that may not be what we call, quote-unquote, normal. Okay, this is a picture of a schizo. This is kind of a classic schizophrenia. This is Al Pacino. I love The Godfather, and I love Michael Corleone. But when they finally put him out here in this garb like a schizophrenic, that's actually pretty good. Usually disheveled, hair kind of unkempt, just kind of. A lot of times they do wear dark clothes. You know, it's kind of overdone, shuffling along. Okay. I'm going to show you this video clip of simple schizophrenia. There's a psychiatrist that introduces before and after. He kind of creeps me out too, but you'll see when you hear him. What I want you to watch for in this person, watch for what all these things. I want you to kind of practice naming stuff. When you look at, just take a piece of paper and jot stuff down. What do you see? Is it alogia? Is it anhedonia? Does she speak in a way that's that? Is there any movement thing that's weird? Let's see if we can pick out words to describe her, because that's what you have to do when you decide about assessment. You have to just be able to name all the stuff you see with appropriate terminology. I did it again. Isn't that grainy and weird?
As time goes on. There's a characteristic lack of interest in the environment, withdrawal from contact with others, and with it goes an increasing loss of emotional response. These people become vague and empty. Their manner is childish and they are gawky. They show little or no initiative and spontaneity. If they do react emotionally, their reaction is often inappropriate. They have, of course, no real plans for the future. In spite of this general impoverishment of their personality, many of their intellectual functions remain intact. Memory and orientation are not impaired. The patient we are going to see is about 40. She has been sick for more than 10 years, lives quietly in the hospital, doing simple work in the laundry. She seldom speaks unless spoken to, and does not mix with the other patients. But she is really quite contented, and her lack of energy and animation is not due to depression and despondency, but to apathy. She might, during the interview, demonstrate inappropriate emotional reaction, particularly smiling or laughing when discussing serious subjects. She complains of auditory hallucinations, voices, and strange feelings of being controlled by unseen forces, though these are not especially common symptoms in the simple type of schizophrenia.
And how long have you been here?
I think maybe 14 months in December, beginning of December.
In this place? You like it here?
I like it when it's quiet.
You like it when it's quiet?
I find it too noisy for the patients.
Sometimes it's noisy here because of the other patients.
Probably.
Why do you like it better when it's quiet? Have you always liked it quiet, or?
I've been used to living where it's quiet, except for the railway.
You told me once that you didn't like the radio
Yes.
in the hospital.
I was unhappy when they brought the radio.
Why?
The ward was quieter without it.
Well, if you're very quiet, what are you doing? Are you reading, or are you thinking?
I'm not reading either.
You don't like reading? What are you doing?
Music better. Listen to music and not talking.
You like that?
Music is the best.
You told me another time that sometimes you hear voices talking to you, can't see the people. Does that happen often?
Yes, I think it's all day.
All day?
Yes, I don't think my head's ever been free of anybody talking.
Can you hear them now?
Since I was a young girl.
Can you hear them now?
I was quiet now.
Or is it
And I
quiet?
can talk, huh? And I can talk without them.
You can talk without whom?
You take away my talking.
The voices?
Yes.
How do they do it?
I don't know.
Can you tell me what they're saying?
I don't pay any attention to what they say.
But you understand them. Why did you come here, Vera?
I've been sick.
Are you still sick?
No, I'm much better now.
But you like staying here. Have you seen your family lately?
No, I haven't.
But aren't you feeling lonesome?
Yes, I was wishing I had a visitor.
They haven't seen you for a long time?
No.
Have you written them?
No, I haven't. I don't like writing letters.
Did they write you?
No, I haven't received any letters either. No.
Think you might have a visit soon?
Possibly if I'm good.
You know what day it is today?
Yes.
You know what time it is about? That's quite right. 10 minutes past 12. Did you see the paper today?
No, I haven't.
Why not? Don't like reading?
I hate magazines. Is my head up there?
Hmm?
Is my head up there?
What
My head
head?
goes up there and I'm quiet.
Where's it going?
Right off.
Where's your head going? What would you like to do now, Vera?
I was playing the piano. I was enjoying playing the piano for a few minutes.
And afterwards, what are you going to do next year?
I'd like to play the piano next year.
Well, suppose, just for a minute, that you were to have $100,000.
Yeah.
What would you do with it?
Hospital needed it.
The hospital needed it?
Mm-hmm.
You mean you would give it to the hospital?
Mm-hmm.
And what would you do?
I want to keep me up.
I want you to keep you here.
Yeah.
Because you like it here. How do you feel?
I'm feeling better, thank you.
Feeling better? Are you sleeping well?
Yes, I'm feeling better now.
How's your appetite? You must be feeling very lonesome, being alone so long. Are you?
Yes, I was lonely, yes.
Why are you smiling? Have you any friends here?
Yes, I have friends here.
Are you seeing them every day?
Yes, I think so.
And what do? You talk to them?
And when I'm allowed to.
You're always allowed to, you know.
Oh, yes.
And what would you like to do now?
Maybe it's time to go back for lunch, huh?
You just had your lunch. How long ago?
Half an hour.
Half an hour. Are you hungry again?
No.
Well, let's go anyway. Let's forget about coffee.
Yes?
All right.
You have seen in this patient apathy, indifference, inappropriate emotional reaction. She was smiling when asked about loneliness, general gracelessness of posture, total lack of ambition and initiative, with no real plans for the future, hallucinations, but her memory and orientation are intact, and she was quite coherent. A characteristic picture of chronic simple schizophrenia.
Okay, he gave you some of the stuff out, but what did you see in her? Anything he didn't name in particular? Alogia?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I might say that she she didn't put a lot out. You have to ask a question, she'd say something, but it would just kind of dive in, kind of pick it back up again. Anhedonia, did you get that? Yeah, kinda. And then asociality, got that. Okay. And her symptoms, did she have any delusions? Did she have a delusion? Does you remember specifically if she said she had a delusion? The hallucinations, yes. Did she have delusion? I don't think she
Playing
did.
the piano, but I don't know if there was a piano there.
Yeah, now that would be the thing, is she somebody who can play a piano, or is that just kind of something she thinks she can do? Did she have disorganized speech?
Yeah.
Did she was disorganized? I don't think I thought she was actually pretty together. I mean, she could actually carry a conversation through. Did she have grossly disorganized or catatonic behavior?
She's a little antsy.
She didn't move. I mean, she moved, but she didn't move a lot. I mean, I wouldn't say
She
she
was
was
doing a lot like with her head, like turning in her hands.
like these negative symptoms. Did she have diminished emotional expression? Did she have that? She didn't do eye contact so much. She put her head down. Was her intonation normal?
She's very normal.
It was kind of I'd give it kind of an wasn't quite there. Movement of hands, head, and face. Did she do that normally? It wasn't terrible. It wasn't great. Expressions of emotion. She did express emotions in face, but she had the mismatch that he talked about. Was she abolition? Did she have abolition? He said. I mean, he even said that she really wasn't doing anything or wanting to go anywhere or pull anything off. Okay. That's enough. All right. Let's look at some other stuff about this. What causes this? Just one other thing. If you had to interview and get a history from a schizophrenic patient, how long do you think you would be in that room?
A long time.
Forever. And that's a big, that is actually a problem of caring for schizophrenic patients that are receiving outpatient treatment. Mostly, they move them along because they just check the meds out. Are you taking meds? Are you doing kind of okay? And they move them on because the time to do the interviews is really hard to get in this environment. Okay, what causes it? It is not known. It is probably a lot of defects in people that all end up showing up with these variety of symptoms. So it's a brain disorder, there's no doubt, but it is not probably from all the same causes. There are no radiological, lab, or psychometric tests for schizophrenia, so you can't x-ray anything, pull a blood test, or have somebody take a written test and figure out what they've got. There are differences in many brain regions of a normal person relative to a schizophrenic. when you do neuroimaging, when you take pathological samples, or you do neurophysiologic studies. Some of the things they've noted: differences in cellular architecture, white matter connectivity, and gray matter volume. It's interesting that in schizophrenics they have a reduced brain volume overall compared to people who don't have schizophrenia, and their brain volume reduces even more as they get older and faster than in a person who does not have schizophrenia. So they really have a brain disorder, bigger and pervasive maybe than we can appreciate. There's a lot of neurologic signs that are common: impaired motor coordination, impaired sensory integration, impaired motor sequencing of complex movements. They have left-right confusion and disinhibition of associated movements. So their whole way of moving, working, and operating is a little bit different. Here's what's called a functional MRI. This is an MRI where you're asking people to do function things, do something. And I showed you one of these, some of these a little bit earlier, but here's controls: people without schizophrenia. These are people who have schizophrenia, and these are relatives of people who have schizophrenia. So there's not something similar going on inside their brains doing similar activities. Okay, now this is the station break. I thought it was kind of funny. Do deaf schizophrenic people hear voices? What do you think, James? I mean, it's always kind of a joke, but what do you think? I think they do. I think they probably do. Okay. Okay, it's a good question. Okay, let's look at, so there's some genetic things about schizophrenia that are important to appreciate. They've been doing research on this for forever, trying to figure out if they can identify gene and gene set. Since the Human Genome Project, everybody's trying to figure out if they can figure out what the genetic defects are, and they have not. But they have found some things. They found genes that are responsible for making dopamine and regulating how dopamine interacts with the dopamine receptors. There's something wrong with that. And malfunctions in dopamine may actually cause schizophrenia in some patients. You will hear from Dr. Latassi later today that a lot of the drugs they operate with dopamine. The neuroleptics, the big tranquilizer agents are all dopamine agents, and this will be part of why they cause some of their side effects. So that's been around for every year since I've ever known about schizophrenia pathophysiology. There may be an imbalance in the interplay between dopamine and glutamate inside the brain, and that can be regulated by genes also. Here's more stuff. Now this is interesting, most schizophrenics do not have a family history of psychosis. So the first time a person has psychosis, most people do not have a family history of it. Okay. However, there's a strong contribution for genetic factors in determining risk for schizophrenia. The liability is probably conferred by what they refer to as risk alleles, groups of genes that code. And they have found that some risk alleles in people with schizophrenia are common across schizophrenics and some are rare. But these same alleles are also associated with the other diseases like bipolar depression and autism spectrum disorder. I think what happens is that when the brain has a dysfunction, to the extent of the dysfunction, the location of dysfunction, they present with manifestations or symptoms. And depending on the area of dysfunction and the significance and the extreme level of dysfunction, they end up with expressions of varying durations and intensities, and it shows up in different ways, and that's what creates your different diagnoses. Everybody with schizophrenia probably does not have the same defect in the same way, but they have enough of a similar background that it shows up with a cluster of symptoms. That's why these diagnoses are always 2 of these, or 3 of these for this length of time. This is really interesting. If you take a child of schizophrenic parents and you put them into a normal family, they will have the same rate of illness as if they had been raised by their biological parents. So that kind of leans towards a pretty heavy component of genetics. A child of 2 schizophrenics raised by people who don't have schizophrenia ends up with schizophrenia at a similar rate. But look at these down here. The lifetime prevalence of developing schizophrenia in the general population, 0.3 to 0.7%. Monozygotic twins, 40 to 50%. So if they come off the same egg and it divides and you have twins, they both don't get it. So you almost have to wonder, what is that all about? but it plays into the theory that it's not only genetic, but there also have to be environmental factors that have to be in place for it to come about. If you look at dizygotic twins, two different eggs, it's only 10%. Sibling of a schizophrenic, a 10% chance. A child of one schizophrenic parent, 10 to 15% prevalence. A child of two schizophrenic parents, 30 to 40% incidence. So there's something genetically being passed along, but it's not 100%. It's not foolproof. I always like to look at those monozygotic twins and wonder why does that not happen. That pretty much tells you right there it's not just genetic material, because if they're supposed to be the same genetic makeup, why is it not showing up in everybody? I don't know. It's one of those things you go, I don't know why. Okay, let's look at the course. The course of schizophrenia is important for you to appreciate as a primary care provider, because there will be people that you will see that you'll think are starting to lean in one direction or another. The psychotic features emerge between the late teens and the early 30s in the vast majority of patients. It peaks in men in the mid-20s, in the early 20s, early to mid-20s, and in women it's the late 20s. So that age thing is important, and the sex differential. The onset is usually, but not always, insidious. What does insidious mean? It just really creeps up slowly. So it might be that somebody who really liked to be around people and talk a lot just kind of gets a little more withdrawn, but it's not their normal way, but they're just not quite there. You might have behavior changes, thinking changes, stuff that just you can't put all together, and then all of a sudden there's enough stuff going on that you can make a diagnosis. So it's usually insidious, but not always. Sometimes you have big breaks in people. Impaired cognition is common and usually precedes the emergence of psychosis. So schizophrenics actually do lose their cognition. They cannot think as well as they did before they get the disease. The course is variable at about 20%, and a small percent may recover completely. You know, it's kind of nice to know. Small percent. I'd say, well, that got to be less than 5 to 10%. Most people with schizophrenia require daily living supports, with many remaining very chronically ill. So most people who get schizophrenia don't ever really get well. They just have problems off and on. They have exacerbations. They have remissions. They're doing better. They're not doing so well. They go back and forth, but they require some kind of support. So a lot of times you see homes, group homes. If a family is really involved, it can happen, but there are studies that show schizophrenics in the home where they were raised actually don't do as well, but there's something about that home environment that is not healing or facilitating, so they're in different places they might do a little bit better. And this is the sad part. Some have a course of progressive degeneration, so once they have the diagnosis, they just continually go down. Cognition down, more psychosis, more dysfunction, more inability, just more withdrawal. And a lot of those people sometimes will end up in mental institutions forever, because there's just no way that they would ever function in the world on their own. The psychotic symptoms tend to diminish over the life of the course of the disease usually. So where they were very psychotic earlier on, there may be less. So less hearing of voices and less hallucinations, delusions. But the cognitive deficits may not improve. So once you lose cognition, it probably is lost. Suicide risk, there is a suicide risk. 5 to 6% die by suicide, 20% attempted suicide on one or more occasions. Sometimes the suicide is because the voice told them to do that, to either harm himself or others. So you can have homicides committed by schizophrenics when the voice says you have to kill that person, you know, you're saving the world, or it may say kill yourself, and they may do it. The risk is high for the whole lifespan of male and female patients. The group at highest risk for suicide in the schizophrenic population is young males, especially if they're taking substances of abuse. So you'll see a lot of schizophrenics on marijuana, other street drugs, as some way to try to cope with all what's going on in their head, but then that makes them more at risk for bad outcomes, like suicide. Other risk factors, if they have depressive symptoms, feelings of hopelessness, unemployment, immediately after psychotic episodes is a problem, and after a hospital discharge. What are the functional consequences? A lot of things go wrong when you get schizophrenia. Schizophrenia will change your life for the bad, for good, mostly. Significant social occupational dysfunction. People can't keep jobs. It's hard to have a job. They often fail to make educational progress. Your child might have a schizophrenic break at 18 or 19. They go off to college and they just drop out and never can do anything because they've lost their cognitive abilities. They've got avolition. They have a lot of other things happening with them. And this is true even if they maintain reasonable cognitive ability. So it's got a lot to do with avolition, social behavior. Most are employed at lower levels than their parents. Many do not marry. Most have social contacts, have limited social contacts outside their own families. Comorbidities. Over half have tobacco use disorder. In fact, in my mind, when I see a schizophrenic, I think about cigarettes. I always, because it's so common, and they smell like cigarettes. So in my experience with schizophrenic patients, I actually can smell a cigarette. To me, tobacco-stained clothes that smell so strong, I associate that with a schizophrenic patient. Most of them smoke cigarettes. And I don't know whether the tobacco and the stimulant has some kind of effect that makes them feel better or what that is. Anxiety disorders are common. Obsessive compulsive disorders may be common. Panic disorders, schizotypal or paranoid personality disorders may sometimes precede the onset of schizophrenia. So, as I told y'all earlier, we're teaching each of these diseases in isolation, but they can have more than one thing. So you could be a schizophrenic coded that way, and you could also have an anxiety disorder or an obsessive compulsive disorder and meet the criteria for both, and so you would have multiple psychiatric diagnoses. Life expectancy is reduced because of associated medical conditions, which are more common in schizophrenics. Dr. Latassi told you earlier today that a big problem with medications is adverse effects, and the drugs that are used to treat schizophrenia cause a lot of metabolic defects. So you're always balancing out, I need to get your mental processes as well controlled as possible without also giving you diabetes and lipid disorders that will kill you from heart disease. So the treatment, which is needed, may also set you up for other problems. Some of the problems they have: weight gain, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, cardiovascular, and pulmonary disease. There are other factors that contribute to reduced life expectancy: poor engagement in health maintenance behaviors like cancer screening, exercise, medications, lifestyle, cigarette smoking, and diet. Schizophrenics usually live about 20 years less. Their lifespan is not that long. It's not as long, anywhere near as long as you would think. Now, I've seen old schizophrenics, but the average, it pulls down. The differential diagnosis and other considerations, cultural-related diagnostic issues you always have to think about. I've always found it interesting that a lot of psychologists in Oklahoma and really in America are foreign nationals. And I'm not against any, but please don't call me a xenophobe or whatever. But there are many people from other countries who have come to America to do psychiatry, and I've always wondered, how can you really appreciate or get this person from rural Oklahoma and how they live, because it's not a lifestyle or a set of words that really would make sense to you unless you lived in it for a long time yourself. So you have to be sensitive to that, because a lot of people do not have the same cultural or socioeconomic background. It's kind of hard for me even to deal with other patients, forget that they have schizophrenia. When you're dealing with people of an impoverished background, you may not understand why they do what they do, but if you're them, it makes a lot of sense. So you have to appreciate that even outside of mental illness, we have our biases based on our class and our ethnicity and where we've been. One differential diagnosis is psychotic disorder due to a general medical condition, delirium, or dementia. You can suspect this organic etiology if they present with significant memory loss, confusion, disorientation, or clouding of consciousness, things that are really not part of one of the diagnostic criteria, this memory loss, confusion thing. There's no personal or family history of serious psych illness. The patient has a medical condition or a chronic medical condition with periodic relapses. That could be the renal problem, the diabetes, the high blood sugar, the breathing disorders where you get hypoxic, a lot of other conditions that can explain mental functioning. And then also, this may be the more key thing to look at, psychosis has developed rapidly, like in a few days, in a patient who previously had been functioning well. What is the usual appearance of schizophrenia? What's the path? Is it just sudden or slow? It's insidious. So that's usual schizophrenia. When somebody goes from normal like you now to Monday or Tuesday, hearing voices and seeing things, that's probably, you have to rule out organic dysfunction. It's so rapid you wouldn't expect that. Other things you want to rule out: substance-induced psychotic disorder. We'll look at that here in just a little bit, but amphetamine, cocaines are big hallucinogens, cause delusions and paranoia. PCP can do both and cause positive and negative symptoms. And here's other things to rule out: major depressive or bipolar disorder, schizoaffective, etc. You can see them. Okay, let's look at this one. This guy, while we do this, let's take a break. Let's just take a 10-minute break right now and then come back and then we'll look at this and we'll finish up our other little disorders, which are kind of faster to do. Okay? What did I do? It's probably schizophrenia. I want to do the course of research versus schizophrenia form versus schizophrenia.
That's what I figured. But I was like, let me ask. Just well, Andrew, you know, it's like if you're willing to order control.
I do. I look at it.
It's okay.